Alright everyone, it's time for a video that some people will dislike without actually paying attention to the video. Trust me, I realize that sometimes I wander onto subjects that are not popular among certain partisan elements of my fan base. That's okay though. Here's what I would say. I want a United States in which there are at least two functional political parties that I can consider voting for. We don't have that right now. We have a United States in which the Democratic Party is a goddamn joke. They're not even taking it seriously. They're not really functioning as a political entity as one would expect, certainly from one that supposedly is the ruling party. They keep cock-smacking themselves, sticking their cock in the beehive, and doing crazy shit. And then you have the radical element within the Democratic Party making goofy suggestions all the time. They end up stalling out their own bills, like the infrastructure bill, because they give carte blanche to the leftoids as in the House Democratic groups to basically fiddle with every infrastructural detail so that it's basically, shovel-ready 2.0. They can't even pass a basic bill that initially had reasonably high support, at least elements of it. They can't even get that accomplished. Then you have the GOP. Now, the GOP is not my natural home politically. I'm not a Republican and I'm not a conservative. I think a lot of people, both who like and dislike me, get the wrong notion and think that because I supported Trump that I'm like, I'm far right or whatever. I know that that's the colloquial term that's used on places like Reddit or Twitter. That's not the case though. Nor, by the way, was Trump far right. It's basically a business Democrat when you really think about it. But there are a lot of people who are politically unaware. They think R means far right and or D means far left, and that there's nothing else. And this clearly isn't the case, but there are people that believe that. Now, I'd like to suggest, therefore, right now the default is that I would support generally the GOP. Not all members of it. Of course, there are plenty of Republicans like McConnell that are old rhinos, Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney. There are people in there that go a little bit off into right-wing spooky woo land, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who thinks she's basically an evangelical 90s throwback. She thinks that Jesus should be the vice president. Well, as someone who doesn't believe in religion heavily influencing the state, I'm not really in favor of that. So some of her proposals are fine, but, again, there's that moral issue. I certainly can't support the rhinos, like a Romney, because of the warmongering. I like Rand Paul. I tolerate people like Ted Cruz. DeSantis has a good head on his shoulders. Trump did a good job. So you've got the part of the party that's good. The Democratic Party, it seems like most of the potentially decent people there have been washed aside. So you've got old neo-libs, which are basically the same as a Romney or a Liz Cheney. So you got like the Pelosi's, the Schumers, and people like that. And the Cuomos, they're getting kicked out now as well through their own personal problems of various kinds. Then you've got the leftoids. Bernie Sanders, who wants to pass a wealth tax that would essentially equate to nationalizing on a yearly basis significant amounts of industrial capabilities without anyone else presumably being interested in buying it. It would literally crush the U.S. economy. But it's seriously suggested by Sanders, Warren, and others. Then you have like the AOC Geek Squad Gang of Four crowd, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Presley, and stuff, that don't know anything whatsoever. They've been astroturfed in there by Justice Dems convincing people that they were grassroots. They're not. They support socialism. Why would I support the Democratic Party? What's there? What possible component of the Democratic Party could I support that wouldn't abuse me? Manchin would be about the closest thing to a sane person in the Democratic Party. When Kyrsten Sinema looks halfway sane, and trust me, most of it is just a grift for political purposes, not because of authentically held positions. She becomes the female knockoff of Manchin, it's for political purposes. Otherwise, it's a bunch of neo-libs. They want to tax me a little bit more. They want to attack my Second Amendment rights. They openly and avowedly in some cases attack the First Amendment. Klobuchar multiple times has openly attempted to coerce the tech world to censor people fucking more than it already does. So, they're not standing for that. On the other end, you've got the leftoids. They want to rob me blind. Supposedly, they're going to give that money to charitable purposes to try to help the poor or whatever, but they're actual charitable purposes that they front, like UBI, would actually harm the economy worse and wouldn't uplift anyone. So I've got numbskull morons on one side that are completely economically illiterate, greasy, sleazy, empty suits who at least topically attack several of my constitutional rights on the other end. There's nothing there that I would ever vote for. And then you have occasional semi-sane Democrats like Joe Kennedy. They get clobbered from the left and they get forced out of office. Here's how to reform and repair the Democratic Party. It requires something that Trump did for the Republicans. Grow a fucking goddamn spine and stand just for once on principle as opposed to, hey, we need to win the election so anything goes. That's what you need. It's what the Republicans have done. The populists are at a disadvantage in certain parts of the country, but they're taking over anyway, knowing that they may lose a few seats here and there in order to reform the Republican Party into something that actually stands for the working middle class and actually gives a damn about U.S. interests as opposed to being just globalistic. They're willing to take their lumps along the way. That means running up against the big money. It means the Republicans, for the first time in a long time, are no longer the party of big corporate donations. The Democrats are. Who got considerably more large donations in the last election? It was Biden, to the tune of billions of dollars. In 2016, it was Hillary Clinton. I think even in 2012, the pendulum had started to swing in that direction. Although, of course, Mitt the Twit Romney is a corporatist anyway, so it was a little more even. In the wake of Trump populism taking over the GOP, though, it's massively lopsided. The Republicans are going back to the era of actual free trade, of actual free enterprise, of standing for the little guy, which is something, if you had told me that happened when I was younger, I'd say, no, the Republicans are the party of big banks, automotive, and big oil, and war. Well, no, now the Democrats are that party. But they need to abandon that. The two parties should fundamentally be competing to see who can be more in favor of the average American, who can represent them more directly and more efficiently as opposed to representing some globalistic interest. The marker for this, and the reason why the Democrats, you can say, are not attempting to move in that direction, they've completely jumped shark. They're still peddling bullshit with regards to climate change. They're still peddling the same globalistic framework with regards to certain things in medicine that we can't talk about directly on a YouTube video. They're still doing that. The Republicans aren't. They're trying to devolve more power to the states and localities, and part of this is the populist upswing. You get literally thousands of precinct positions throughout the country have already been overrun by populists, partially led by Steve Bannon. As a preparation, I believe, like Trump's weight loss, which he apparently has done quite well at, for a 2024 run. I genuinely believe that's likely to happen. All signs point to, yes, he's running. In which case, he clobbers Biden if he runs, and I think that's what he supposes is likely. I disagree. I think it'll be Kamala more likely, but we'll see what happens. It could be an open field. Maybe the Democrats will do what I wish they would do. I hope they run Joe Kennedy. I hope they get some young, reasonably charismatic upstart from a legacy political brand, the Kennedys, which unlike the Clintons or the Bushes, his name is still kind of worth something. Yes, I know, JFK is overrated, he was a womanizer, oh blah blah. Okay, the JFK presidency was far less dysfunctional than what we've had lately, other than Trump. Since going back to first term Reagan, that's the last time we had sane governance prior. That or Eisenhower. And of course, with any president, I can't think of a single president that I unilaterally support everything that they did. Even if Thomas Jefferson were in office today, I'd probably have fucking disagreements with the dude. Certainly with Trump, there were a number of times that I deeply disliked what he had done. It was just the general preponderance of things I thought was good, especially in comparison to the prior presidencies from my own lifespan. The Democrats should go down the route of bringing the Democratic Party back to what it used to be. That is, instead of being completely goddamn antagonistic towards private business endeavors, just be antagonistic towards corporate predatory behaviors. That's a winning ticket, by the way. The American people would appreciate it if instead of trying to screw every business, and that means small businesses, sole proprietors, go after the monopolies that your own administrations have helped to create. Undo your own fucking problems. You made a mess. Clean it up. Instead of constantly doing the police state expansionist bullshit, world policing thing, why don't you take a step back and avoid that? Attempt to use actual diplomacy. I know it's harder. I know that means you have to go and talk to dictators and people that are kind of shoddy, but kind of important now to avoid war. The people at this point, after 20 years of Afghanistan, don't have the stomach to invade anyone anyway, so you'd be limited to all the drone strikes. They prefer to invade directly because then they get war footage and it, amps them up and makes them feel like they're young again. And think about drinking blood and all that weird shit that the politicians tend to do. What about, instead of trying to create a tax code that's based on everyone should pay more, well, why don't you revert the government and shrink it a little bit? There were Democrats in the past that believed that was a good idea. It's been a while. Things have gone off in a bad direction. The fact is that I'm not a Republican. I would like it if the Democratic Party would go back to the era in which it was at least somewhat sane so that there would be more than one option. Because regardless of the Republican that runs in 2024, there's a 90% chance I support him, even if I have considerable disagreements with elements of their policy, because the alternative isn't just worse. It's not just a lesser of two evils sort of choice. It's a glaring difference between the two candidates. Looking at Trump v. Biden. Trump had already been tested. He'd been in there for 4 years. Disagreed with some of the things he did. COVID was playing havoc with the economy, but by and large was a good president. Biden, meanwhile, is sitting there rambling the whole time. He's completely incoherent. His entire platform boils down to, hey, I'm not orange. It was pathetic. What about him? Hillary Clinton just genuinely scared me. I was afraid that if she was elected, we'd be at war with Iran, and probably right now I'd be sitting in a radioactive crater somewhere. I'd probably be ghoulified. I do believe that would be possible under a Hillary Clinton presidency. She's nuts. She would have done the I'm as much a man as you game and pressed their little red button just to prove that she had the balls to do so. I think Kamala would possibly do that as well, which is why I'm hoping, long life to Joe Biden. Live long enough to serve out your term, then fucking retire, because you'll be 82 fucking years old at that point. I wish that the Democrats would go back to a party of JFK thing. Or even, I would prefer it if they went on to be like party of Jimmy Carter at this point. Even that would be better. Why don't you get Jimmy to run in 2024? He's like 95 years old or something. He's still more coherent than Biden and still healthier. Didn't he beat cancer as well at one point? As long as there are still some of those parasitic footworms in a few scattered spots in Africa, Jimmy Carter can't die. He's like, he sold his soul in order to destroy these, I can't remember what they're called, some parasite that burrows into your feet, and it's horrific. And Jimmy Carter's people have pretty much eradicated it, except I think in 1 or 2 countries, I think like South Sudan and Congo. They pretty much eradicated it. So in other words, just keep a few live specimens in an aquarium tank somewhere, and Jimmy Carter's immortal. He knows this. Run him. I'd be more likely to vote for 95-plus-year-old Jimmy Carter than I would any of the chuckleheads that are likely to run in the 2024 election among Democrats, because they've just screwed the pooch. They are so abjectly stupid. They are so incapable of governing sanely, there's no reason that I would even conceive of voting for them. If the Republicans were to totally mess up and run like Santorum or something like that, I just would vote for Mickey Mouse. I genuinely, no Republican scares me enough to vote for the fucking Democrats at this particular moment. Takes a while to get me there. Of course, I voted Obama in 2008. Yeah, I wanted the hope and change thing too. Democrats never gave it to us. They just gave golden parachutes to corporations and then squandered all our money on shovel ready, and they're trying to do it again. That's about all. Peace out.